Today is the 5th day of this December 83 7-day retreat. And we will work on a koan from the Blue Cliff record, right now taken from the book by Sekida, Two Zen Classics. It's case number 55. And it's called Dogo's I Would Not Tell You. Actually, the talk is concerned with death and dying, as is the koan. This is the main subject. It's sort of a lengthy koan. One day, Dogo, accompanied by his disciple Zengen, went to visit a family in which a funeral was to take place, in order to express sympathy. Zengen touched the coffin and said, "Tell me, please, is this life or is this death?" Dogo said, "I would not tell you whether this is life or it is death." Zengen said, "Why don't you tell me?" Dogo said, "No, I would not tell you." On their way home, Zengen said, "Teacher, please be kind enough to tell me. If not, I will hit you." Dogo said, "Strike me if you like, but I would not tell you." Zengen struck Dogo. Later, Dogo passed away. Story does not say why. Zengen came to Sekiso and told him the whole story. Sekiso said, "I would not tell you whether it is life or it is death." Zengen said, "Why don't you tell me?" Sekiso said, "No, I would not tell you." Upon these words, Zengen attained sudden realization. One day, Zengen, carrying a hoe, went up and down the lecture hall. Incidentally, Sekiso had taken over the monastery where Dogo had taught. He was his successor. And this is where Zengen went back to and is now with his hoe. One day, Zengen, carrying a hoe, went up and down the lecture hall as if he were searching for something. Sekiso said, "What are you doing?" Zengen said, "I'm searching for the spiritual remains of our dead teacher." Sekiso said, "Limitless expanse of mighty roaring waves, foaming waves wash the sky. What relic of the deceased teacher do you seek?" Zengen said, "It is a way of acquiring strength." And here somebody else comments, Taigen Fu said, "The deceased teacher's spiritual remains still exist." The commentator, Sekida, says that that time in history was probably also 9th century China, 9th, 10th century China. Monasteries and monks and abbots did not hold funeral ceremonies. For deceased people in the community, or, well, they didn't hold funeral ceremonies. But they did go to offer condolences when somebody had died, and this is what took place here. The teacher, accompanied by his disciple, went to visit the family in which a funeral was to take place, in order to express sympathy. And Zengen touched the coffin. Apparently it was not an open coffin like here in this country, decked in finery. People made up to look like they've never looked before. Which is a very significant thing, to preserve the image. A new image, really. Touched the coffin and said, "Tell me, please, is this life or is this death? Or is he alive or is he dead? Dead." And Dogo pressed several times with the same question. He says, "I won't tell you." Maybe interpreted as taking sort of a superior stance. Or it may just mean find out for yourself if you have a problem with it, which obviously you have. It just seems that recently a lot of people came to the office or meetings whose close relatives have died, mothers, fathers, or a brother or a sister. One's husband or wife may suddenly die, one's child. And grief hits, usually not during the busyness of the funeral, and maybe not while, if one has an opportunity to be with the dying person. Often there may be moments of real peacefulness and understanding and just being with the person who's dying. Making no demands upon each other. Just being with each other, as one maybe never has been with each other during this hectic life that we lead. But then with a person gone, dead, some shock or deep grief may strike. And it's so important at a time like that to look for oneself what is this whole business of grief. It has so many ingredients, one of which is, of course, feeling sorry, maybe for the person who died. Maybe there's no reason to feel sorry. The person was deathly ill, suffering, maybe losing mental faculties. So for that person certainly must have been a relief. But for oneself, there's often the memory left of this person, not so much in the state of illness, but how he or she was when healthy. And then, as is the way of desire, of wanting still to be with a person as she was or he was once. And then the feeling of loss, and the idea, the thought, I will never be able to be with this person again.
the way I imagine him or her right now, and that causes grief, sadness, pain. Also thinking of how will I live without this person? If it was a person one has lived with. And the tremendous fear of having to make it alone, missing the companionship, which again in one's imagination takes on aspects which it may never have had. Happens so frequently when people lose their mate or a person close, that this person becomes more and more an ideal figure of memory, of fantasy. Not always. There's not always grief either. Sometimes also for the people who are left behind, there's great relief for not having to be with this person anymore, not having to visit this person in the hospital any longer, or just plain being rid of this person who was a burden, a pain, hard to live with. And yet society may prescribe grief, and then one will pretend grief. Which one can often meet in funeral parlors when one makes a visit. But there's something else in the pain and sorrow when someone dies. And that is seeing oneself in that coffin. And the refusal to, or the difficulty of thinking of one's own death, and the scariness of it, the fear of it, which is, as everything else we have described so far, the process of thinking and imagining, and the emotions it evokes within oneself. Fear, grief, sadness, nostalgia, loneliness, pain. This thought which comes up, which one doesn't like to think, but it intrudes, I too will die sometime. Which means what? What are the ingredients of that fear and the pain felt at that thought? Some people, when we talk about dying and death in a talk, say, this doesn't concern me, I'm not afraid of death, I never think of it. All right, if one doesn't think of it, one is not afraid of it. But is one really finished with the fear of dying? Or is it just that one has successfully eliminated it from one's current thinking? And it will surface. The fear will surface if death hits close. Not maybe the death of someone else, but one's own. One may find out one has a terminal disease. So what is it? Why are we afraid of dying? And in thinking about that, we think at the end of my life, dying at the end of my life. Because now with all the nuclear bomb stuff going on, the fear of dying moves much closer than it was when there wasn't this awareness of sudden possible death, why wasn't there this awareness? The possibility of sudden death is with us all the time. Why am I afraid to die? And what is it I'm afraid of? What is it that I don't like about this whole thing of dying? That I rather want to turn away from it and escape into the most effective escape from that thought and idea which nevertheless may haunt me. Everyone has to look at this for himself or herself. What it is that one is afraid of in thinking about dying. Is it the pain of a painful process of dying? Or is it leaving behind what one is attached to, what, as one puts it, one loves? The people one is attached to, who give one good feelings, good sensations, comfort, good company, feelings of self-importance, self-esteem. The idea of having to leave that, having to leave one's home if one has one. We're talking about, in this case, a very small minority of people in this country, not so much a minority, but throughout the world, definitely a minority. Because most people don't have a nice place to live. And yet there may still be the fear of having to give up what one calls one's own four walls. One's possessions. They may be precious, ample, large, or small. It doesn't matter. What matters is the attachment and the fear of losing, of leaving behind, of being without, which is all the process of thinking and imagining. Or if one loves to hike, to walk, to swim, to ski, one loves the trees, all things in nature, watching the sunrise and the sunset. There may be this nostalgic, painful feeling, I will never see that again. Never again will I see spring or the beauty of the fall, glistening snow in the wintertime.
Won't see that anymore, it won't be there for me anymore. Where is it for one right now? At the moment of such thoughts. Is it real? Or is it already the deadness of memory? Albeit seemingly alive. And in walking through the woods, right now, is it alive? Seeing the sun rise over the mountain, is there just that? and nothing else? Or is there the thought lurking, or not so much lurking, very much there, oh, I hope I'll see that tomorrow too. And then one doesn't see the sun rising. Then there's the hope and the fear of maybe not having a tomorrow, and the clouding of this, of what? Of this freedom from thinking and projecting and remembering, and all the emotions of fear, grief and sorrow that go with memory and projection out of memory. Who knows, maybe at the moment of dying, there may be not the faintest thought of a sunrise or a sunset. Or the house, or the possessions, or the loved ones. There may be or maybe not. Is it any different? I'm asking this, I haven't died. I'm still alive. But could it be any different from being with any moment? So much so that one is dying to all the ideas about it, from moment to moment. Dying to the wanting to grab it, have it, hold it, possess it forever. Dying to that whole thought process, and therefore alive with what is right now. If that is not possible, if one is forever either wanting to preserve, conserve, or attain in the future, then one is already dead. Dead to what is actually here. Underneath the feet, in front of the eyes, under the nose. Pulsating with life. Maybe greater than the attachment to possessions, one's house, the way one built it so nicely, and the landscaping around it, the love of the garden, pretty picture window, the beautiful view, or the person with whom one may sit and enjoy that view here and then. Maybe greater even than this attachment or to one's children or the image of one's children. It's most of the time the image. Because when one is with one's children, one is usually not with them. Very rarely. There's something else to do. They're a nuisance, they're bothering. Not all the time, but. So, greater than the attachment to all of this which one thinks one owns or is my own, is mine, is the attachment to me, myself, the idea of me. It may be the strongest attachment, outweighing all the others. The others are just sort of implementing, or how do you say, supplementing this image. They're appendages to the image of myself. Myself as existing still for a long time It would be nice if I could think forever. I just recently talked with somebody who had just heard or is taking a course in how it's not a cloning process, it's a process which has superseded or replaced, or I don't know what, cloning, where a part of a human being could maybe be made into an exact duplicate, which then will live on, and you can make duplicates forever, like with Xerox. Not right now thinking of the implications of overpopulation. But this person really is very serious about this, and the way she put it was, it's a strange historical fact that at the moment where this is possible, where our own, how she put it, our own immortality is within reach, there is this atom bomb thing which may wipe us all out at the moment where we can achieve what human beings have wanted to achieve since time immemorial, immortality. And we may all wipe this out with atomic fission and fusion. But mind you, what is it that would survive in this? What is it that would be immortal in that scenario, which apparently is not just a science fiction thing? There's something going on. It's already happening with plants. I think this was the case. She was taking a course in which one can take pieces, parts of plants, not seeds or so, and something, and a new plant just like that is created. Whether it would work with a human being, heaven forbid. Because what is one duplicating? Is this brain duplicated again, over again, as it is? Full of its memories and pools of conditioning and needs for revenge and for outlets and for aggression and fears and escapes and hopes and the whole thing, which in itself is self-degenerating. If the brain just operates in all of that as it does, and there's no wiping clean the slate, at least every once in a while, this is the self-generating process of the brain and results in senility, early or late. It's not restricted to old age, this repetitiveness of our thinking and of our compulsions. So it merits thinking this through, how one really pictures an immortality with all the old stuff made immortal. We saw recently on 60 Minutes a section on a city which is in Africa, Lagos it was called, in which there is no garbage disposal. None. It was an incredible thing. Garbage almost piled as high as the skyscrapers everywhere. And in the sewers, no sewage system. In the ditches, I should say. A very rich country, actually, for the few. So in one's own system, we're very concerned, preoccupied often with the proper elimination of our body, that there be no constipation, that things work well, and we're very concerned of the day of constipation. Haunts us on the ads, on the TV ads. How to spend a happy day with X-lax. And this total unconcern about the constipation of the brain. On the contrary, let's stuff some more into it and not forget anything. Somebody once said that a brain specialist, I believe it was, that if the brain cells were completely able to eliminate wastage, whatever that is, the brain could live forever. I don't know whether it's any more so than any other cell, but elimination, according to this person, is a great problem. Not a problem, but it is the degenerative process. A lack of elimination of waste. Physically, we try any remedy to do it. In any new book we try that suggests a new way of getting rid of toxic materials. I'm not really debunking it, but so much it is almost sometimes a religious type of thing. But what about the accumulation of memory in the brain, which runs us, compels us, unawares, into conflict after conflict with ourselves and others? One of the compulsions being the fear of dying and the inability to die to all these accumulated memories and wiping the slate clean in this dying, which means in being with what is now, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, painful or joyful. Being with it without withdrawing or clutching it, running away from it, or wanting to keep it forever. If that is possible, to really die to attaching to this thing or that thing, this memory or that person, which doesn't mean going into a hermitage. Then it's attaching oneself to the hermitage. But not attaching. One can see what attachment is. It's quite visible if one really wants to look. The fear of being alone, of not having one's pleasures. The fear of losing what gives pleasure. And perpetuating it much more in memory and imagination than really being in touch with it really in reality. And being done with it when it's over. Really done with it. And it doesn't persevere as a memory in the brain, adding to the garbage, to the waste material. Another attachment of this self that wants to continue forever and that is afraid of seeing itself not be, which is a thought, thinking of its ending. A new attachment which comes out of this fear of ending can be to a theory or a promise of continuing in a hereafter, in a next life, being reborn, reincarnated. Rising up into heaven. One doesn't want to think about the possibility of the opposite. That may have been in the mind of this monk too, when he says, is this alive or dead? How nice for this illumined, enlightened teacher. I hope I have an illumined, enlightened teacher. I assume that because he is from the traditional lineage, and that is my security. How nice would it be if he said, he's not dead. He may look dead. But its soul goes marching on. Because in Zen one doesn't talk about the soul going marching on. What is that? Oh. That's John Brown's. John Brown's body lies mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. So here one would be told, depending on the tradition, Tibetan tradition, there's the bardos, the different stages. I'm not knocking. I'm not saying it exists or doesn't. I don't know. I've never been there. I don't remember. Why should I remember? Why should I dwell in memories of my last bardo? Although these days it may become profitable. The next lifetime. It's a consolation. I was told once that an enlightened person is not afraid of death because he or she knows that she will be reborn. Which means, now I fixate and attach to my next lifetime and do not face this fear of death. Which means I have to stick with whoever assures me of this. If I'm too far away from it, then I may be gripped by the fear of death again, so I have quickly to reassure myself through somebody who seems to know, or must know, I think, that I will be reborn, and then I may attain what I seem to be unable to attain here, freedom. This is very, very interesting. This man here, whatever his name is, says, I won't tell you anything. I won't give you any bait, any hope. Do with it what you want to. But I will not be instrumental in holding out something that you don't yourself understand and see clearly for yourself. Because this man here, Dogo, sees the vulnerability of the disciple, of Zengen, in his fear, in his concern, in his dismay, uncertainty. He could tell him, he could exploit that. And the fearful person would grab it.
anything so not to be in touch with fear. Anything so not to taste freedom for oneself, which may be not the easiest thing in the world, may be fraught with fear and pain and dis-ease, but it is not dependent on any theory, on no promise, on no fantasy, on no experience of someone else. Somebody else may have experienced something, but can I rely on that for my comfort? If I do, I'm hooked. And hookedness does not go with freedom. The two are incompatible, totally mutually exclusive. So when the disciple came back after the teacher had died, the successor, Sekiso, using the same words. Is he just repeating what he heard the teacher say? Or is there understanding that explanations and promises are not only no help, but are a bondage, putting someone in bondage? So, at one point, having heard this now many times over, and probably having heard it in his memory, here, all of a sudden, there's an insight. Call it what you want to. Into what? Is it an insight into life and death? These are words. Into no thing. But then this strange ending, because it can probably be interpreted in many ways, we'll just take it for what it gives us here. Zengen carrying a hole, going up and down the lecture hall, as though he were searching for something, and Sekiso saying, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm searching for the spiritual remains of our dead teacher." He says, spiritual remains. Or does he mean the relics? Because there is that too. In religious tradition, the worship of relics. If one hears that this happens in a religion that one is not a member of, one says this is superstition. If it is the practice in a religion of which one is a member, then it's not superstition. I remember once in college, in a history lecture, the history teacher, we were talking about Japan, was saying that the emperor of Japan actually believes that he is remember this wrong, something like the direct descendant of a god. Is that correct? Something like that. That there is such a thing as being a direct descendant of God. And everybody laughed in the class. Everybody laughed. How could one be so superstitious? But we just don't look at our own religion, if we have one. In Buddhism there is the worship of the Buddha's relics. Stupas have been built. Stupas, these are these buildings, these round buildings that have been built on top of a relic. And then one goes on a pilgrimage circumambulating the stupa in which there is supposedly buried a relic of the Buddha. I think from having heard how many stupas there exist, one wonders. But I'm not trying to ridicule it, but to see how far belief will go. Faith, externalization of not faced internal uncertainty and pain and fear. Are we afraid of freedom? Freedom means no attachment, because there's no fear. Attachment goes hand in hand with fear. The fear causes the attachment, and then there's the fear of losing what one has grown attached to. So what are the spiritual remains of a teacher? Wonder what Dogo would have said, knowing that his disciple was looking for his spiritual remains. And upon asking why you're doing this, saying, it's a way of acquiring strength. One interpretation is the strength that comes out of gratitude. What he really wanted to do with this symbolic act of hoeing there for the spiritual remains is express his gratitude for having not been given the answer at the time and coming to realization himself. But where is he now? Again attached. There's a story I once heard about a man in handcuffs wandering all over the country to try to find freedom from these handcuffs. And finally he entered the smithy of a blacksmith who saw his predicament in a moment, took a hammer and just cut through the handcuffs. And the story says, out of loyalty, the man remained in the smithy for the rest of his life. Sikiso said, when Zengen said, I'm looking for the spiritual remains of my teacher, Sikiso said, limitless expanse of mighty roaring waves, foaming waves wash the sky. Meaning, everywhere, everything. No place where it is not. If the waves wash the sky, there is no gap any place where the water is not, or the spray, or whatever you want to call it. Where it is not. No place where it is not. What are you looking for? And if you say, but I don't see it, it's true, the eye does not see. The eye is blind. The capital I, that is. When the eyes are blind, it doesn't mean that there cannot be seeing. So who is the teacher? Who am I? What is more? What is it? We will end here for today.